in the late 70s, digital games started taking over from mechanical games, and Gottlieb was the only company that didn't think it would ever catch on. So they continued to build mechanical games long after Bally and Williams decided to stop making them. The only problem was operators weren't buying them, so they had a tendency to pile up in warehouses. The last game they made before this was called Spacewalk, and they only made 75 of them. It was a two-player mechanical version of Countdown, a real famous digital game from Gottlieb. They apparently, from what we can figure out, is they had on the drawing boards a game called T.K.O. They had ordered the glass be made, and they had ordered the playfield to be made. But then when the parts arrived, they decided that since they only sold 75 of the last one, it wasn't even really worth their time to put it together. So I think what happened is the whole thing got scrapped. Somebody that worked at Gottlieb saved the glass and the piece of wood, and it kicked around from collector to collector till Dennis Dodell, the guy who did the Pinball Trader newsletter back in the early 80s, ended up with the glass and the playfield. He said he would never have any time to build a game around a piece of glass and a piece of wood. So I volunteered to take over the project. Since then, Steve Young in New York came up with a blueprint copy of the schematic. Usually your mechanical games have a schematic that's real small. This was the actual schematic off a blueprint machine, and you can see somebody spilled a drink on it, and parts of the whole schematic are just kind of washed out. I've had to guesstimate what they were and put them back in with a magic marker and a pen. So what I started out with basically was just this sheet of glass, a printed piece of wood, and nothing else. And if you want to look underneath here, this is where it gets weird. This is what it looks like when you hand make a game. You can see that the cable looks like kind of handmade. All the wires are twisted together. The relays don't seem to really fit that well, and it doesn't have that factory-made look. You'll also notice that some relays are obviously off 60s games and have the copper plating, and others are off 70s games and they have the satin chrome plating. It was really kind of a mishmash of parts and things that I had sitting around. I also have to fudge a little. Right in this area here, it got extremely tight. I had to put all the resistors on a circuit board, and anybody that's ever fixed a Williams game will recognize that circuit board as a Williams resistor board. You might also recognize this step unit. This is from a Bally machine. This is actually from a Bally bingo machine. The reason I use that instead of a Gottlieb unit is because the Bally step unit has all these rivets already in place, and the Gottlieb unit they would make specifically for each game and only put a rivet exactly where they needed it. Also, the Bally fingers are reconfigurable. You can take them apart and move them around however you want them. So basically, if you had to design something, the Bally unit is the one to use. The only problem is Bally coils are 48 volts and Gottlieb coils are 24 volts. So then what I had to do is I had to take a Chicago coin coil and a Williams coil, put it on a Bally unit, and put it all together. It was quite an experience. And if you look at the cable, one thing I found out, if you're going to make your own game, it's not a good idea to twist the cable together. Curtis, I probably explained this to you the other day. What happens when you twist wires together and you have them go any distance? What you end up with is a big electromagnet. So by twisting the cable like this, I'm getting inductive resistance from the transformer to the flippers. I'm actually losing a little bit of power because this cabling is actually making its own magnetic field as it goes along. If I had to do it over again, I would start out by buying a spool of white wire and make all the wires white and then just stripe the ends of them with nail polish. I get 6 or 8 different colors of nail polish and stripe the ends of them. The way it turned out was I was just repeating too many times over and over again the same wire colors. This is a very confusing game to fix. I did make a couple obvious stupid mistakes. If you look down here, you'll notice that the cable comes off the playfield on this side and it ends up going over here to the other side. What happened was I was working with the playfield upside down, and I glanced at it and I said, oh, that goes on the left side. And left being right when you turn it right side back up. Luckily, I did manage to put enough extra wire that I can actually physically pull it over to the other side. that wasn't too much of a problem. But from now on, I'm only referring, instead of left and right, to the shooter side and the non-shooter side, so that I don't get confused like that anymore. Another problem I had, if you look at the tilt mechanism down here, when I finally got it all together and decided I wanted to put the playfield back down, the first time I put it down, that Bally step mechanism ran wham right into the tilt mechanism. So what I had to do was actually physically mill the end of the rolling ball tilt off and just kind of eliminate it. I also added this bell in here. There wasn't originally a bell called for in the schematic, but I figured you can't have a boxing game without a bell. It's all hand-wired. This head and this body originally came from a Gottlieb game called Bank Shot that Jan Bradbury down in Phoenix gave me specifically for this project. He found it out on somebody's porch, and the cabinet was just about completely wrecked. So the first thing I had to do was do a lot of wood fill work. If you listen to the sound of the wood, this cabinet is about 75% Bondo. I also didn't know what the stenciling on the cabinet looked like, so I just painted it flat vanilla white. I figured it's kind of a test game, a special case. I'll just paint it white. I also did manage to find the correct door sticker. During that period, D. Gottlieb was owned by Columbia Pictures. I actually got the right sticker to go on the door if this game would have been built. Don Murphy in Chicago came up with original scorecards for T.K.O. Even though they didn't build the game, apparently they made the cards. But the only thing I couldn't get were these playfield plastics. If you come in real close on one of the plastics, you can see that it's just a piece of Lexan with a color photocopy kind of tacked to it with rubber cement. And if you look at the art and then compare it with the art on the back glass, you can see that it's just a color photocopy of the back glass tacked onto plastic. But what could I do? There were no other games that existed. Then about 6 weeks ago, I got a call from the Pin Game Journal guy in Michigan, and he said that he had talked to somebody on the internet in Argentina that actually had a T.K.O. And so through the guy in Argentina, I got color photocopies of the correct playfield plastics on plastic like that. So that'll give you an idea of what the playfield plastics were supposed to look like. And in the next couple weeks, I'm going to go through and cut these out, mount them on my plastic here. A couple other problems I ran into. I didn't know what color bumpers were supposed to be there because the schematic just says bumper, bumper, and bumper. So the first time in my life, I had to make a decision, a designer decision, and I decided that red, yellow, and green are pretty colors, so I put red, yellow, and green on. Also, if you'll notice, the ball, when it comes into the playfield, comes over here, and there is no puck. There's no rebound rubber here. Originally, the Bank Shot had a rebound rubber here. You can see that the holes are there. But this game just had a post right there. Sure enough, the post works good. So I just left it with the post, didn't put a rebound puck on it. Since then, I've seen the picture that Jim Schellberg of the Pin Game Journal has, and it does have a puck, and it is mounted way, way over here. You can notice that on the rebound, the metal rebound on this side, I had to leave the original holes here and drill new holes farther down here. This is a very wide top part. Kind of a strange game. Another thing, I was able to figure out that this was supposed to be a white target right here because the schematic referred to it as white target. And I know these two were bullseyes because the schematic referred to these two as bullseye. So I was able to actually get the right parts. I was also able to get the right flipper coils for it because on the schematic, it actually said use the A17875, which anybody that's ever worked on a Gottlieb digital game knows is actually a solid state flipper. In order to make the solid state flipper work, I had to put a bridge rectifier in to provide DC power to the flippers and the bumpers. It's mounted on a separate plate here to keep it cool, and it uses a double run of wires so I don't run into that inductive resistance problem. It was a pretty weird adventure, I have to tell you. And I did put in every single wire that the schematic called for, even though I could have eliminated a lot of stuff like 5 plays per quarter. I'm probably never going to use 5 plays per quarter, but I figure as long as I'm building it, I might as well build it right. Another weird thing about this game, getting into the playability of it, it's the only Gottlieb single player I've ever seen where the same player shoots again. Gottlieb would never make a single player game where you could win a free ball. It was just sacrilege. The whole basic thought of the game is to advance these lights all the way up to the top to this red light, and then your special's lit. When you get to the second white one, you light this white target over here for extra ball, which is something you never saw anywhere on a Gottlieb single player. Hit it, and the same player shoots again. Then when you drain the ball, it kicks up over the switch. This relay disallows this switch, and then this trough switch right here dumps out the shoots again. That was kind of weird. I also put the flashing bumpers on it. I know it's not factory, but I like to see bumpers flash when you hit them, like that. Another weird feature is there's 5 nipples along the top, the infamous Gottlieb twin star nipples. If you hit all 5 of them, they give you 5,000 each. Plus the last one gives you 5 bonus advances, which brings you up considerably higher. And if you can do that 2 or 3 times, you get this all the way to special, which means a free game for shooting these holes. It also means that the bumpers are lit all the time for 1,000 points each. Another problem with this game when I was building it is that the playfield had warped. While it was sitting, at some point, there was actually a 3 or 4 millimeter bend in the wood. It had actually physically warped. And what I did to get around that was to actually have to physically bolt through the rails that held it on and keep a constant tension on the playfield. And in order to get the bolts to sit flat on the runners down here, I had to countersink the nuts. So even, just doing something stupid like that, when I first put the playfield down, I figured out it wasn't going to lay flat. It means that I had to spend 6 or 7 extra hours going back through and taking everything apart, bolting it through, making it flat, and making it fit again. There was many nights of cursing and big hammers. I played this game extensively after I built it. I would like to say it's a great game, but I think that's stretching it. It really is a good game, though. It's excellent to look at. It's excellent to play. Ugly Mike, you've played this game. What do you think?
Good game.
Good game.
Yeah.
Great game to look at. Curtis, do you have an opinion?
Well, I wanted to ask you, how long did it take you to put this game together?
Oh, time-wise, good question. Good question. This represents about 2 weeks out of my life, working 8 to 10 hours a day, and it also represents quite a few of my parts. I used up almost all my relays building this game. It was worth doing once. I don't know if I'd want to do it again. If somebody else tried it that isn't used to changing playfields, it might take even longer.